see as wonderful programs introduced to South Asian community. So now the time is to listen to Karen Davison. So it's a privilege introducing Karen. Karen Davison is an award-winning scholar who is currently the director of Nutrition Informatics Research Group and Health Science Program faculty member at Queensland Polytechnic University. Her investigative interests are aimed at food and nutrition practices, interventions, and policies that will foster the generational transmission of physical, mental, cognitive health in diverse populations. She is currently an academic editor of PLOS One and serves as an editorial board member for the Canadian Journal of Dietetic Research and Practice. Lots of other credentials to Karen's accomplishments, lots of awards to count here, many more publications to count here. So more than anything, it's time to listen to Karen about what we always look at bringing a behavioral change. And is there a need for it, and how do we do it? How to bring in a capacity building? So let us all listen about all these topics from Karen. Over to Karen.
Good morning, thank you. I just want to check and make sure that you can see the slides. Someone can give me a thumbs up. Perfect. So actually this presentation, I'm going to have Vidhi Thakkar, Dr. Vidhi Thakkar started off. She's a research associate that works with me in the Nutrition Informatics program. And then I'm going to come in a bit later and talk a little bit more about behavioral change interventions at the individual and community and population level. So Vidhi, do you want to begin?
Just a second, please excuse me. Sorry for the delay in introducing Dr. Vidhi also. Then I thought the talk will be split, so I introduced Karen first. So before Vidhi talks, give me an opportunity to introduce Vidhi as well. A few seconds, please.
Sure.
So once again, the two individuals who have brought together this concept, and I'm so privileged to introduce Dr. Vidhi Thakkar. So Dr. Vidhi is currently working as research associate at Queensland Polytechnic University on various projects related to mental and physical health, as well as COVID-19 analysis and of the Canadian longitudinal study on aging. So she is a postdoctoral fellow in patient-centered measurement research in the School of Nursing at Trinity Western University. Dr. Vidhi has completed her PhD in health policy from Institute of Health Policy Management and Evaluation. Vidhi also received master's from experimental surgery from McGill University, and her bachelor was from McMaster University. So once again, as I said, both of them have many more credentials to talk about, but over to Vidhi to listen to her about the topic of the day.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manjunath, for that warm introduction. And Karen, thank you. And Dr. Arun Garg, thank you so much for inviting us. We're both delighted to be here today and to speak to you about behavior change and what is needed and how to build capacity. And it's a team effort and collaboration, so I'm delighted to have these conversations. On to the next slide, Karen, please. Some of our key takeaway messages are understanding health behavior and what is health behavior. We'll speak about prediabetes as a cue to behavior change and approaches that we can take at the individual, community, and population level. And at the end, we'll speak about our research and highlight some of the key concepts within our research. So in terms of health behaviors are actions that individuals take that affect their health. They include the actions that lead to improved health, such as eating well and being physically active, as Samantha mentioned, making healthy, informed decisions, and also actions that can increase one's risk of disease, such as smoking or excessive alcohol intake. Jeff Garrett here, and as you can see on the slide, she makes different healthcare, different decisions on a daily basis in terms of what she eats. You see a meal here from Tim Hortons, fruit juice, some ice cream, cookies and popcorn. So we all can see that she can benefit from more eating healthy and also eating out less, right? So but the central question here is, does Jepkirek want to change? It has to come from her and her own decision to change. So does she want to change? So as somebody working with her, you can offer her resources to help move her from the thinking about change to actually taking action and making healthy decisions and practical changes in food selection and food preparation. Now, what is her motivation to change? And that's when we talk about the health belief model. So many factors contribute to people's behavior, including our genetic background, our life experience, the transitions we've had, our exposure to certain traumatic events, for example. And in order to understand the likelihood that one will change, we look at this health belief model, which was developed to explain and predict health-related behaviors. The health belief model suggests that behaviors vary according to gender and structural factors, for example, where you live and your environment and your direct community. So we have, and the health belief model asks you to evaluate how serious the consequences can be and the susceptibility of a person to experiencing those consequences. And secondly, a cue to action is needed in order to initiate the change. So here we have the example of Lisa. She doesn't think that diabetes is a big deal. However, and she also doesn't think she's susceptible. However, all of this changes when her father is diagnosed with diabetes. So when this happens, this really changes the way that Lisa thinks about diabetes. And now with her dad being diagnosed, she thinks that she could be at threat of getting this disease, and she may want to make some lifestyle modifications. So one critical factor for her is actually taking the action, self-efficacy, or believing in oneself that they can change their behavior in terms of lifestyle choices, eating, and physical activity. So let's go back to the cues of action and presume for instance, let's say that Lisa is diagnosed with prediabetes. And I'll hand it over to Karen, who will speak more about what prediabetes is and evidence-informed strategies for healthy lifestyle changes.
Great, thank you, Vidhi. So I'm going to talk a little bit about prediabetes as this cue to action within the health belief model. And then also thinking about with prediabetes, it's a lot about lifestyle. So thinking about different interventions that can be done at the individual level, and then we'll move on to community and population. So prediabetes, as you may know, is a major problem in Canada. About 9 million Canadians have this, and it, as the name implies, it can be a precursor to type 2 diabetes. Prediabetes is really about insulin resistance. So insulin is this hormone that, of course, I think you know, is needed to get glucose into your body cells so that you can use that energy source to carry out your daily activities. So when we have insulin resistance, the insulin is not working as well to get that glucose into the body cells. So the person experiences symptoms such as fatigue, hunger, and thirst. And it typically happens in people around 45 years of age and older, but we are seeing it earlier and earlier. And with prediabetes, I find when I was working in diabetes education, it can often be this cue to action. So people realize, oh, my blood glucose levels are now elevated. What can I do about it? So a lot of the interventions that are for prediabetes are really interventions that, people in the general healthy population should be following as well. But basically these core interventions are what we call the health behavior triad. So first of all, managing stress. And I think that a lot of us have had challenges this last year with this, having to transition to say home work environments and that kind of thing. But this mental health, I cannot overemphasize it enough, is very critical to physical health. There's lots of research that shows this shared etiology between physical and mental health. So it's really important that people address issues such as anger, depression, which is becoming increasingly common. We all know as well that there's research that's showing the impact of loneliness and isolation and its impact on health and health behaviors. And then, of course, ensuring that we get good sleep quality. So that's about 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And then diet. So diet is one of those #1 risk factors for these chronic health conditions. And generally speaking, I mean, there's a lot that can be talked about with diet, but we really want people to move towards a higher quality diet and managing their weight. So when we talk about high quality, we're talking about minimally processed foods, getting more fruits and vegetables in the diet, whole grains, healthy fats such as the omega-3s, and healthy protein sources, particularly plant-based sources. And then finally, exercise. So these are the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiology guidelines, which recommend that we should get at least 150 minutes per week of cardiorespiratory activities at the moderate to vigorous level, and a minimum of 10 minutes each time. In addition, we want to be doing at least twice a week muscle strengthening activities and reducing any sedentary behavior, so screen time, sitting time, to 8 hours or less per week, and partaking in a lot of light physical activities. Now, these are high-level general recommendations, right, that we all know and are aware of. But we need to make sure that we're tailoring this kind of messaging at an individual level to different populations. And again, with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen this huge disparity between equity-seeking populations, right, in terms of them getting access to health information. So what are some of the strategies that seem to work? So this is based on current or the evidence, not just current, but longer term evidence. So the education needs to be personalized and capacity building. And I think that's kind of what was getting at with the previous presentation as well about the personalized menus. Exercise can be very challenging for people to engage in. So sometimes what can help them to kind of motivate them is their physician actually prescribing physical activity, as well as health coaching, if that's something that's available. With diet, again, many different strategies, but one that really people resonate with is the plate method. So the understanding that half of what they eat at a mealtime, for example, should be fruits and vegetables. And what's shown here, of course, is Canada's Food Guide to illustrate that. The other is mindful eating. So getting people to be aware of what their hunger cues are and their cues to fullness. And then research does seem to show that self-monitoring, so you can get all of these kinds of apps like the Eat Tracker, for example, that can help you monitor your eating, your physical activity, your symptoms, say depression symptoms. And these can show, the research seems to show these help certainly in the short term. You know, people do tend to get a little bit bored with them and stop doing it, but so the longer term evidence is maybe not quite there yet. Then there's other strategies that can be done at the individual level. So social prescribing, which was one that we came across in our lit review during the COVID-19, has been seen. So again, people's social connection is really impactful on people's health. And the lack of social connection is something that needs to be addressed at the individual level. So in some communities, such as in Toronto right now, they're doing this social prescribing and testing it as a model, as well as peer support. So that's where you have a peer support person working with the individual and helping them to engage in these health behavior change programs. Then there's the whole area of, say, what I call digital reality or computer simulations. So there's augmented and virtual reality, which is now, you know, people can engage in these computer simulated environments with virtual realities within a 3D environment. And the research seems to show that they learn these behaviors within these environments that are simulated, and then they can translate it into their real life. Artificial intelligence is another area. So here what's being shown is a mirror, a physical activity mirror. So they're being shown the activity to copy. And then there's cameras that are built into the mirror that then gives feedback to the person in terms of their performance and their form. And then there's this whole area of personalized approaches, or what may be called as gene-based approaches. So there is a lot of that out there. Evidence is mixed, and you have to be careful about, you know, what programs you're engaging in. But the premise behind it is that you get your genetic profile, you see what kind of risk variants that you may have for certain health conditions or outcomes, and then you can, you know, be given a personalized, tailored plan to help prevent or delay the diagnosis of, say, those conditions. All right, so those are some examples at the individual level. And then this is where we need to be working together, right, to help affect behavior change. So here I show some mapping that was done by the Surrey White Rock Food Coalition, which shows that in certain communities, in certain residential neighborhoods, access to healthy foods at produce stores and grocery stores is an issue for some people. So they're more than 10 minutes away from these sites. So thinking about how the community infrastructure is and how we can better develop it to help create that environment for people to change. Then there is physical activity. So there's this whole area now that we call physical activity insecurity. You may have heard the term food insecurity, but physical activity insecurity really refers to, again, the built environments and how can we better create a better infrastructure for people to engage in physical activity, such as the muscle strengthening activities that are shown here that could be done in the park. And then we need to go across settings. And I like what Samantha was talking about with the work site program and that. So the work site is one important setting, going into daycares, starting early in life so that children learn that healthy eating and physical activity is fun and, you know, something we want to do as a lifelong activity, and also in schools and online environments. So the example showing here where people can go in as avatars, and it creates this social environment and as well an environment for learning about health behaviors.
Karen, I apologize for interrupting. I'm just doing a little bit of a time check now.
Yes.
Okay.
2 slides left. All right. So then finally going up one final layer, which is the population level. So we have to think about policy, which Mark Peltier was talking about earlier. So here we have the health behavior change wheel, where and in the hub is the behaviors that we might want to target. And then we go to the next layer and we have 9 different options here for interventions that are based on what we assess at within the core hub. And then finally, at that broader level is these policy targets and categories where we can come together from different disciplines and help to affect change. So for example, with environmental and social planning, thinking about how we can better design the physical and social environment. I'm now going to turn it over to Vidhi to talk a little bit about the research that we're currently doing, and then we will be finished.
So we're pretty much on time. So Vidhi, about how many slides do you have?
Just very briefly in 2 to 3 sentences. It'll take maybe 10, 20 seconds. I'm delighted to present that we're working on multiple different projects, including the Canadian Longitudinal Study on Aging, to examine factors that contribute to depression and those that have diabetes. I'm comparing Canadian-born and South Asian immigrants as well. And then I hope to take these results to engage different stakeholders like policymakers and healthcare providers. We're also working on the personalized nutrition education study, which examines this concept of precision medicine that Dr. Garg was speaking about, to see if a personalized nutrition approach can change eating behaviors. Our experimental work looks at investigating how people respond to different nutrition and health messages by using eye tracking and biometric assessment tools to see changes in their heart rate. So if any of this type of work is of interest to you and you would like to connect with us, we are open to collaboration and questions as well. Our emails are located at the bottom of the slide there, and please feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Delighted to be here today and present.
Thank you both. And I love the little diagram that you have on there now, with the DNA into a person. Because we've gone over time, we're going to pass on the questions, but Karen and Vida, we will get the questions to you that people ask, so you're aware of those questions. And Dr. Majanda, I will pass that back to you now.
Thank you. Though we are overshooting time, I truly wanted to say a word about this presentation, both Karen and Vidhi. Amazing. I mean, I think this deserves a keynote presentation.